I'll also record on Skype. We'll see what I get. Ugh. Okay.
It says that Beth is using a device that could record or broadcast this call.
Oh, great. All right. Okay, so first let me introduce you. Hello, everybody. Welcome. And sorry I couldn't do this live. Today I have Patti Koelsch Stoudt, who is, I would say, an expert in not only homeschooling, but also expert in special needs, right? Homeschooling, as well as testing and other support for homeschoolers in Pennsylvania. So that's my brief introduction. And also to give you an idea of how Patti and I met and connected a couple of years ago. But we were both pretty active in the Pennsylvania Homeschool Support Group on Facebook, which I still recommend. So many people are active on that, and the moderators are really generous with their time and spend a lot more time on Facebook. So I always refer to them as an excellent resource. So yeah, if I missed anything in the intro, Patti, please just tell everybody about your services and your background.
Okay, I homeschooled all three of our children. We started with 1 year experiment with kindergarten, and 20 years later ended our experiment when I graduated my youngest. One of my children needed to be homeschooled as if diagnosed with special needs, but we never had him formally diagnosed. And then one of our daughters was formally diagnosed. Well, our daughter, she's deaf. And so I did homeschool her under an IEP in conjunction with the public schools. And, so that's that. And I started doing evaluations for homeschoolers because I am a certified teacher about 25 years ago. And my practice has built and built and built, mostly by word of mouth. And my two subspecialties that I've kind of grown into are high school and graduation, as well as special needs. I went back to school in the middle of that whole homeschool journey to earn my doctorate, and my dissertation I researched was homeschooling children with special needs under this PA law, the specifics of the PA law. So that's kind of how I've grown into that area. But I just love it. I love to do testing. I love homeschoolers, and now that I'm no longer a homeschool mom, I love still being involved vicariously through the many, many, many families with whom I work.
Did you tell me last time that you also are an adjunct professor at the college?
I was in the special ed department under specifically deaf education, but I retired in May.
Oh, congratulations.
So I do this full time. On the side, besides my homeschool stuff, you'll see if you go to my website, there's an extra little page, not homeschool related. I do editing for like doctoral dissertations, APA specific things. It's just weird. I love grammar, and my kids call me the grammar grandma, my grandkids.
Wow.
So.
Well, and before we get into the nuts and bolts of the testing requirements, I'm curious about how the pandemic has affected your clients, your business, just your support of homeschoolers.
Well, it's a two-pronged answer to that question. Number one, last year, the pandemic affected me because I had just retired, and my husband and I were going to depend on my evaluation income as our sole income. But we also are responsible and did Dave Ramsey and don't have debt and had our emergency fund of 3 to 6 months budget, so we didn't have to worry about it. But the governor waived the evaluations last year and waived testing.
Right.
But the beautiful thing about the relationship that I have with my clientele is even though my normal 350 people didn't need to have their evaluations done, over 100, almost 150 still wanted them, even though they were optional, because they love the kind of feedback and support that I give them.
I appreciate that because I hope we can maybe change some minds today about the requirement and talk about it as a tool, the testing. So first, and then the second prong is, have you been inundated with?
Yes. I have turned away more families than I can accept
Mm.
because my clientele was already filled, and so all the new families that are specifically homeschooling due to COVID, I've been out and speaking and doing seminars on homeschooling, but I also run a page on Facebook specifically to mentor new evaluators. So I have somebody to pass to whom I can pass the baton.
Yeah.
And I also maintain a page on Facebook with a growing directory of people who are doing evaluations. I don't do any vetting. That's the family's responsibility, but I'm willing to provide a free listing along with the free listings that are on the CHAP homepage, Christian Home School Association in Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania Homeschoolers website for FA, the One Diploma program. Right. And so I'll give links to other evaluators and try to help people find one that will satisfy their needs. But the amount of homeschoolers that have come in because they weren't doing well with the online distance education with public schools is amazing. And yet those people are coming in not having previously embraced the ideology of homeschooling.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like a crisis homeschooling, and that's not said in a negative way. It's said in a survival way.
Right.
But my counsel to those families for curriculum selection is much different than my counsel to people who are embracing homeschooling as a long-term school option.
Absolutely.
Because if they want to blend their kids back into the public schools, they want to keep their kids up with them so they don't fall behind because they went off and got all creative. You can do both, and there are ways to do both.
Yeah.
But my counsel to those families is completely different.
Yeah, and that's what I struggled with too in the late summer and fall as families were realizing that the online model wasn't going to, or a hybrid model wasn't going to work for them. And it is a completely, you're referring them to completely different resources. And so many of the resources I relied on to learn about homeschooling and then that guided my homeschooling just have a different philosophy about education. And if you're going to be jumping back into public education or, in-person education, yeah, and it was really hard for me to separate on my own page when I welcomed, hey, I'm available to help you. And I was telling you offline that I tried to start a group, but I was also, I couldn't turn away people who were just new homeschoolers, but also had planned to homeschool forever, or veteran homeschoolers. I didn't want to turn them away, but there was no way not to be rude to say, this isn't for you. So I had to just dial back and rethink how I could help people. And how has it been finding resources for people who really absolutely intend to send their kids back to school? Has that been tricky for you or no? Oh, okay.
No, because the state publishes their standards per grade level on their website.
Yeah.
And the law allows homeschoolers to request from the school district curricular materials. Mm-hmm. And most school districts want to know that you're interested in re-enrolling when they open.
Yeah.
So it's a different tone.
Yeah.
And everybody's working together to try to survive. And there's not as much district homeschool animosity that I've seen.
Good.
And I think that's depending on where you are in the state and what your district is.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I have found for the most part.
Good.
And they all want to know that there's a hope that you will come back.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, half of them already have had materials at home because they've been distance learning from home.
True.
The only thing you don't get is like those free iPads or free laptops or whatever they are. Yeah, so I'll also say here's the kind of questions that you need to ask. I don't tell people what to do, but I try to equip them to be wise stewards themselves.
That's great. That's great. All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts of testing in Pennsylvania. So I'll let you, because you are the expert, just talk about the requirement for testing.
All right, I am not a numbers person, and numbers go in one eye and out the other, and in one ear and out the other. So it really helps me to cement one thing, And that is 3 plus 5 equals 8.
Okay.
And so in homeschooling for Pennsylvania, anyone that's homeschooling under an affidavit with having submitted their objectives needs to know that their children in grades 3, 5, and 8, because 3 plus 5 is 8, that's the magic combination of grades, are required to have results of a nationally normed standardized achievement test in their portfolio.
Right.
And so what we're going to talk about today are how do I satisfy that requirement? How do I go about doing that? And how do I get over my own test fear and not transfer that to my children? Because I have kids that come in here and shake. And I'm like, why are you afraid? And I look at mom and she's shaking. And I'm like, that's why you're afraid. Okay. Testing is not pass or fail. In homeschooling, nobody can tell you to stop homeschooling because of test results. Now, if there's cause and a reasonable doubt that an appropriate education isn't taking place, there is due process. The school district can't say, you can't homeschool next year, but they can say, we're a little nervous about what you're doing there, so we can say, let's do an evaluation throughout the year next year. Let's do several evaluations.
Except for only the evaluator sees the results of that test.
And that's just it.
Yeah.
That's it. Excellent point. So the school district, unless you choose the option to have your child tested with the school, with PSSAs, they will see the results. And that is one free option. But if you have your child tested through a private source, whether it's online or with a person like me who does the testing, you're the only one, you and your evaluator are the only ones that see the results.
Right.
And there's nothing to fear. And so if you wake up in the morning and say, what can I do today to ruin my child's life, then you should worry about how your portfolio is going to appear. But if not, don't worry. I mean, I always give all of my families a can of they eradication spray. Mothers are saying, what will they think? And I say, spray. Get rid of the word they in your vocabulary.
That's great.
We often remove peer pressure from our children's shoulders by homeschooling, but we usually assume that on our own shoulders, and we worry about are they missing something? Can they be? It's like, okay, let's get rid of the nerves and let's attack each day to say, what can we do to be learned and excited to learn by the end of today?
Okay. Well, now, the other thing that I wanted to clarify, well, you might as well talk about the different types of tests that are acceptable under the law.
So the law in Pennsylvania says that the State Department of Education will maintain a list of approved tests that will satisfy this requirement. It's easy to access. You go onto the Pennsylvania Department of Ed, DOE, Department of Ed website. You click on their homeschool resources. They have a link to go to approved tests. It's updated semi-often.
Yeah, every couple of years or so, one or the other might change. Usually,
when my test that I administer has an updated version, I contact the Department of Ed and say, please update your list.
Oh, okay.
But also keep the old version on for several years because some examiners can't afford a couple $1,000s to buy a new test.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and so I work very closely with that Department of Ed when those transitions come, at least with the test I give.
Oh, okay, good.
So one of the free options is to enroll your child with the PSSAs with the school district. If your child has attended school, that's a great option. They might be able to see their friends. With COVID, sometimes the testing has been canceled, so that's it's a moot point when the testing is canceled.
Yeah.
But we are not sure how they're going to be performing with the PSSAs. Is there going to be an online option? I guess the districts are looking at that.
Oh, that's right.
Now, there are 10 or 11 other options on the list. One of the ones I see most frequently out in the homeschool groups on Facebook is the California Achievement Test, CAT, and we call it the CAT.
The CAT. That's the one my kids took. Yeah.
And there's a resource. There's several resources. You can just Google it, but the one I see most frequently used is at academicexcellence.com. And Beth is going to post that link later on after our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it runs about $25. Sometimes you can get a coupon for a discount or a discount code. But when you go on there, you want to request the complete California Achievement Test because that will satisfy the requirements of the Pennsylvania law. We need to have scores in reading/language, which is English, and math, just 3 areas. And so the complete California Achievement Test will do that. Now, the problem with achievement tests is those of us who have gone through the public schools, we get stressed out. Pencils up, pencils down, time, okay, stop, okay. The beauty of academic excellence is they offer an option to take the California Achievement Test complete untimed. To do that, you create an account, you save your password, and then according to your child's attention span, you can log on and off over a couple days with short periods of time and have the child take the test.
That's a wonderful
One of the
option.
things with that test is you have to specify which grade level you want the child to take. So I get parents with children with special needs saying, well, I have him an idea of 3rd grade this year, but he's really only doing 2nd grade work. Well, you can request a 2nd grade test.
Okay.
The test is not to turn in results to the district. It's for you to get good information that affirms what you're seeing at home.
Yeah. Yes.
And so if your child's running behind and you test behind and it confirms that, then you're purchasing the right curricular levels. And that's the whole point behind the test, is to give you information. If there's big surprises, it worries me because that means you don't have the finger on the pulse of the program at home. But most times parents are actually relieved because it feels affirming.
Yeah.
For kids that, okay, back up. In the olden days, we always used to have to get paper tests and have another homeschool mom or a grandmother proctor the test because the law says the supervisor or spouse cannot administer the test.
Right.
Because the California Achievement Test online is delivered through the computer, there's a new interpretation that the computer itself is the proctor. And therefore, it's giving the test to the child. It's not the parent, so you don't have to bring in another person. You don't want to sit there and give all the answers because you're not going to get true results of where your child's performing.
Right.
Now, you might have great numbers, but what you just wasted $25. Yeah. You're operating out of nerves and not out of, I really want some good information.
Not only that, I think then the message that your child gets is that this is an anxiety-producing event and that I can't do it myself. You know, and I get people's fears.
Or it's okay to cheat and bend the rules.
Right, right.
So
and there's no reason to. There is no reason to worry about the results of the test. It is a tool. And, so. And then let's talk about for a minute, if there is a gap or, you know, it doesn't confirm what you think is going on, then somebody like you can, you know, it can give a parent some ideas about where to fill the gaps. And I don't know how you go about doing that, but maybe I can explain that process.
When I'm working with families that bring me results from other tests, I'll say, A, do you know how to read it? B, would you like some insights? I never offer unsolicited advice. I wait till parents ask me. And then when they ask me, then I might give them ideas to curriculum that have helped children struggling in those particular areas. Or I might say, you might want to go for a vision test and get vision processing, not just acuity. And I'll get technical with stuff. But I won't ever tell them what to do. I'll say, here are some resources and some ideas.
That's wonderful.
I had one student that I tested that I suspected had a hearing loss because in the spelling part he dropped all the S's on the spelling words, which I know because my profession is hearing, and all the siblings ended up getting hearing aids.
Wow.
It was a family hearing loss issue, and mom was not aware because one-on-one they understood what the teacher was saying. Oh. So there's stuff that I've caught that isn't bad or problem. It's I'm on mom's team, and my job is to be wind beneath her wings. And what can I do to help her soar way above and help her kids be all they can be.
That's amazing that even a health professional didn't pick that up.
Well, and I said, your child has allergies. How do you know? I said, crusty nose and gray toned skin. And I said, I don't want you to get a hearing test once. I want 4 times during the year to see if allergies fill his ears with fluid and affect his hearing and are affecting how he's learning.
Wow.
But that's my area of specialty.
Can you come by my house and diagnose me?
I don't diagnose. My name's funny. Dr. Stout, but I'm careful about that.
Wow.
So then funny. Another one I saw, I had tested this child since he was little, 3rd grade, 5th grade, 8th grade. And I noticed some odd behavior quirks going on during 8th grade. And I said, Mom, we need to sit down and talk. And I said, it's time to make an appointment with a pediatric neurologist and psychologist and have him completely tested. And don't be surprised if you hear the word Tourette's.
Wow.
And so that changed the course of their life. And we worked together on that and through that. And it was right after I had done my dissertation, and she felt like God was training me for her. So I try to be on the family's team. And there is a new psychologist in one of the groups that I'm on Facebook with, who was a school psychologist and now is homeschooling her children, and she is willing to work with me in tandem because technically I can't give a diagnosis, but she can.
Oh, wonderful.
And so we're willing to work now as a team.
Oh, wow.
So there's some individual tests that people give. There's an evaluator up in the Williamsport area who gives the Peabody Individual Achievement Test. That's on the list of approved. It's no longer being printed. I can't purchase a copy of it. But it's nice to know that they can go somewhere in person and have a child tested one-on-one. The test that I give is also one-on-one. It's called the Woodcock-Johnson. It's on the list of approved. You'll see an IV afterward. That just means it's the 4th edition.
Okay.
I've been using the test since the original edition. And I meet with the child one-on-one, usually in my home. Sometimes hostesses host
groups.
Group days, Now, testing days. They're not group days because it's all one-on-one.
Oh, I see.
One right after another.
Okay.
And so that test takes about an hour, whereas the online test takes a couple days.
Oh, really?
Mine takes an hour.
For the language, the verbal, and the math. Oh, wow.
The language, written language, it's reading, written language, and math together.
Right.
I do 2 subtests under each. For an 8th grader, it might take an hour and 20 minutes because they do all the bigger math problems. But it's less than 2 hours. We're done, have the results, and had our talk.
Oh, wow. Okay. And
I can do more. I can do science, social studies, and humanities for those people who want it.
Yeah.
But to do the basic requirement, now I do charge more. Instead of the 25, I charge a base of 40. Sometimes I run a fall discount to help my business spread throughout the year. But the 40 gives you all of that consultation time and all of that input and all of that support. So while it is more expensive, it's less time and it's a lot more support.
How does it work with families with if they have multiple children? Likely, well, I guess sometimes they'll have kids in those respective grades, but do they just do it on different days? Because if you're testing one, and even if it's an hour and you have 2 other kids in the family, do they just come back on a different day, or do they kind of do it successively in your experience?
It's up to the mom. If they're traveling quite a distance, we try to do them in one day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can do 4 or 5 students in a day. I prefer 4.
Okay.
But if they have children, I'll say bring snacks, bring activities. I do have a basement full of toys. I am a professional grandmother. I used to say to moms 25 years ago, drop your child off, run down. Salval has buy one, get one free, Salvation Army store or Goodwill's nearby. But because of the changes in society, I don't do that anymore.
Smart.
I say, Mom, you're going to stay here on the premises.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in an office.
Yeah.
The first door off the living room, the door will remain open. The child will be in charge of the door. If the child is distracted with noise, he or she can open or close the door at his or her comfort level. But we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, that's important. That's really important. I had another technical question.
I can tell a little bit more about that particular test.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
What I like about the test is that the child reads the reading parts, period. And I read all of the rest of the test to the child.
Oh.
And so I know that the reason he's scoring low on math word problems isn't because he can't read them, it's because he doesn't know what math to use for them.
Okay.
So we isolate each individual skill.
Oh, okay. That's it. Now, is that, and I don't know if your experience, would that be acceptable for, let's say my neighbor was giving the cat to one of my children. Would that be acceptable on a test like that or not necessarily?
I don't know that I'm getting the connection.
Well, could my neighbor, if she's proctoring an in-person paper test, allow the kids, the student to read the reading part, but then read the math, say a word problem on the math part? Do you know about that?
If I can answer that from a public school perspective.
Okay.
If I were in public school and we were giving everybody a test, the only way my child would be allowed to have the test read to him is if he has an IEP and the IEP says to have tests read aloud.
That makes sense.
Otherwise, the word standardized says the test must be given exactly the same to every single student. And to individualize a standardized test is an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah. I would just want to tell a funny story about the timing. So my mom, my experience, and maybe there were online tests at the time. We're talking more than a decade ago when my kids were that young.
It's newer. It's a newer convenience.
So my mom would give the kids tests, and also my neighbor, and who was a former public school teacher assistant. And so my mom sends back her notes, like of the timing with the test. Like it was just part of the booklet, so she just sent it back with my son. And I noticed like her math was off, so she was cutting off so much time. So she was giving him less time than because however she noted, oh, it's this time, and in her brain she's saying 25 minutes, she couldn't calculate it, so she was jipping him on time.
Well, I don't trust me with anything with numbers, so I use, now the phones have timers, I use the old-fashioned timers before, because I needed that outside support. So.
Yeah, so did she, but so yeah. So I'm wondering if...
And that was back when the results had to be turned into the district.
I know.
So since 2014, when the law changed, now these young homeschool families, they got it easy.
They do have it easy. They do.
I'm saying that facetiously.
I know. No. I'm glad. I'm so glad for that part of the law. That was. I remember being very thankful about that. Portfolios to superintendents. Yeah, so I don't know if we have anything specific on testing, because we covered that, your third grader doesn't necessarily have to take a third grade test, and that goes for the other grade levels.
If I can interrupt, the test that I give, the Woodcock-Johnson, is not a grade level test. I give the same test to every child. The test is normed from preschool to college.
Really?
And so I'm trained. I had to submit all my credentials to the company before they allowed me to purchase it. I had to go through clearances just to be able. Yeah. So to be able to purchase that, I'm trained to do this. I've taught college courses on this test, and I'm trained to know where to start. So if you're in 5th grade, I'm going to skip the kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade test questions, and I'll start. And then there's these things called ceilings and basals, and I need to know where to start and where to stop.
Interesting.
And so that's part of the training with the test, and that's why we can do it in an hour, because I can hone in on where the student is. And I have to wait until he has so many wrong in a row that I stop, because we might be in the 10th grade questions now. And so we're past where but I don't want to stop too soon, because you might know something in 6th grade or 7th grade, you see. And so I play with it, and I let the child stand up and wiggle and squirm. And I say, do you need to stand up and do 10 jumping jacks or jump up and try? I mean, I work with the student, and so we work on it together.
Mm-hmm.
And the end results will tell me what grade level the student is working on. I don't start out with a grade level in mind, except I need to ask Mom, you don't have to specify a grade on your affidavit, but in your head, you're asking me to test your child this year. What grade are you thinking your child's in?
Oh, nice.
5th grade.
Nice.
So then I'll register the test as 5th grade, but it's all the same question.
Do you find that most parents get that pretty accurate-ish? They're like where they're thinking the grade level is for their child.
Well, I
feel
try
like
to
it's such a
separate
fluid
that in
thing.
people's minds, and I say, let's call a social grade level so that when they go into Awana or Boy Scouts or youth group or Sunday school, they're hanging out with their age level peers,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're super gifted and working on a 9th grade level in 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Or if they're super, super behind. I still say call the grade level their social grade level, but then buy curricular materials on their mastery level.
Okay. Yeah,
and
that's
so
a good
there's
way to
the
do
ability
it.
level. We call it grade placement
Mm-hmm.
and grade performance.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will test to the performance level, but the results will affirm Mom or not. But I still go the social grade level for grades 3, 5, and 8.
I see.
But parents are allowed to test every year. I have some families that want all their kids tested every year.
Oh, okay.
They're allowed to test anything, extra subjects and extra years. If I have a really low-functioning child with special needs, sometimes I like to test yearly, but it's still the parent's choice.
Sure.
And even if we're making small increments, I have demonstrating sustained progress in the overall program based on the law-required wording for an evaluation.
The standard. Do you ever have parents who test more in the beginning of the year than the end of the year?
You can test anytime throughout the year.
Right. Because
the tests are normed on how far through the year. So if you test in, say, October or November,
mm-hmm.
and your child's in 3rd grade, all the scores are going to be compared to 3.3, like 3/10 of the way through 3rd grade.
Right.
If you test at the end of the year, they'll be compared with 3.9. Okay. They only compare the results of your child's test based on the date when your child took it. So your child won't be compared in the middle of the year to kids
mm-hmm.
who have already finished the year and say, oh, he's behind. He
mm-hmm.
didn't learn it yet. Well, guess what? It's earlier in the
Mm-hmm.
year. So the grade levels are only based on the date of when in the year they're being tested. It doesn't hurt them. That's on my website. I explain everything on my website.
Wonderful. Well, you did send me a link in our message to your website.
And to the testing page of my website.
The testing page of your
mm-hmm.
website. Yeah.
And again, I can't test everybody, believe it or not. But I have a colleague in Lancaster area who does this test, and she will travel up to the Allentown area.
Okay.
Because that's where her family is. And I have a colleague in the Harrisburg area mm-hmm. who does the Woodcock-Johnson. And I have 2 local people here that will use my test and do testing, and I have one that just purchased her own test down in the middle of the state, and I have one out in Oil City on the western end of the state. I don't know anybody proper in the Pittsburgh area who does this particular test, but it would be easy to ask around in homeschool circles and find out.
Well, tell me how you get certified to test, because somebody might be watching and be interested in reaching out to you, say in my area, to find out how to become certified to do that.
It's specific to the test.
Mm-hmm.
So like for the Woodcock-Johnson, as I said before, I needed to submit my resume and all my experiences and all my courses I've taken and assessments for them to allow me to purchase their materials.
Right.
But then the people that I've trained and mentored are under my account, and I know they can give the test and they respect the integrity of the test. I have 3 forms. There's Form A, Form B, and Form C. So we switch them around. So one woman is testing on Form A 1 year. I'm testing on Form B and the other. And so we trade them so that if Mom wants to test them year by year, they're not getting the same questions, but it's the same standardized statistic.
Okay. But it sounds like that only works in person. So your two colleagues are in your area that you can physically switch out the forms, right?
One's in Lancaster, but she's my sister-in-law, and she was my evaluator the whole way through, so we get together to switch, to swap.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and then the one out in Oil City, she has one of my older versions of my test. And then I'll train and mentor anybody. It's a very, very expensive test to purchase.
Yeah.
And just the forms themselves are $8 each.
Wow.
But it's worth it in the long run. I just wait until I get enough income from testing to buy the next section.
Yeah.
And now I've branched out to do more like LD kind of testing. And so, yeah, it's always areas for growth. But to become a tester, you either need to be working with somebody who's already approved to purchase or send your own credentials. But it is not cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So we have a couple of minutes, and I think we covered everything. Don't you think we covered everything about testing? The procedure, what the law requires, the
various options.
Yeah, I think we did. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about how, first of all, how you support families with special needs in particular. And the first question is do you offer approval of home education programs on the front end of the process?
Yes. Now, what does that mean? That means that there's only one extra requirement for parents with children with identified special needs.
Right.
Supposing my child attended school and had an IEP, and now I'm withdrawing him from school and starting to homeschool. Some people say take the extra step and withdraw the IEP. There's pros and cons to that. And we can talk about that. If you hold on and remind me to come back to that. Okay. But we worked well with our district with the IEP, and my daughter's now working on her PhD, so I don't think I did too poorly homeschooling her and nice. Under an IEP. But the parents with children with identified special needs, the district knows they have special needs, just need a letter of approval from a certified special ed teacher or a school psychologist saying, yep, I read your objectives, and yep, they're addressing your child's special needs. Go ahead. Okay. And they submit that with the affidavit and their objectives at the beginning of the school year. They don't have to do anything special. The end of the school year, they can use any evaluator. They do not need a special ed evaluator. But some families like having a special ed evaluator because they get better curricular coaching and maybe ideas and support. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But that's not required by law.
I have two specific questions. The first is, because I haven't looked really into the law, so even if the child has never been in public school, would the parents availing them of, say, agency services or special services, would that be defined as identified as special needs, even if they were before school age?
It's really splitting hairs, and this is what I wrote my dissertation on. And I have found that parents really decided in their own minds, identified in paperwork to the district is the defining line.
Okay. No, I'm
glad to know that.
And so
one family had 3 children on the autism spectrum, and the children were identified in early childhood and never sent on to the school district. And they had behavior specialists that came to the house while they were preschool. And that was all arranged through their medical card and through the county office. Okay. And so they continued those services the whole way through homeschooling because it was paperwork through the county, not through the school district. And they actually had teachers' aides coming into the house and helping the mom get through the school day. Okay. But that depends on agency and it depends on personality. Not all of it is a positive thing, but she had fantastic resources. So it's very individualized.
So did that family, even though that the children weren't identified in the school district, did they have the extra approval at the beginning okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. Okay.
Because they weren't identified in paperwork to the school district.
Okay.
If you have your child identified through a private resource and you're obtaining services through a private resource and that's not being sent, I signed a paper. They couldn't send any reports to anyone. I was the case manager.
Okay.
And I decided who got copies of my reports because some medical agencies assume it should go to the district.
Right.
And I just made sure that I have to approve wherever it goes.
Okay. Good.
So.
Okay. Good. That's good to know. And the second.
One more thing. We held on to that. Is it good to withdraw the IEP? Number one, legally it expires after a year. If the district doesn't re-up it or the parents don't request to re-up it, then it's kind of like a dead document, but they've still been identified even if the IEP is not active.
Yeah.
That's where the touching points. But later on, if the child decides that he'd like to go to community college or trade school, and the child needs some assistance with extra testing time or somebody to read the test aloud, like we mentioned before, it's better to have all that documentation in place because you need to work with OVR, Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, and the local office. And they have to go back through and get a complete psych eval. And having that documentation can really be mom and dad's and child's best friend later on. It's not always good to withdraw.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. Yeah, even for the SAT, if they could get accommodation for that. Okay, that's a great
That's
point.
a royal pain to get approved for. It takes so long, like months and months and months and months to get approved for it. And then it's only for reading directions.
Oh, okay.
The whole SAT thing is really a tough situation.
Yeah.
But there's more than one way to skin a cat, and you can get, excuse me for you cat lovers, but you can get into colleges without SAT scores or not dependent on SAT scores by having them take one class early and then go on their track record. My daughter tested low on her SATs. She's deaf, and so her language levels were different. But she took college courses all through her senior year. And I said, could you just look at that file instead of just her SAT scores? And she had straight A's, and they're like, she's accepted.
Great.
Yeah, but why didn't you look at that? It's your college.
Yeah. So. Okay. Oh, and
you
then
were going to ask another question.
Well, we came back to the IEP, but no. How can, so you also offer evaluations. If somebody's not already familiar with you and is not in your area, I guess you can refer to them, but do you do distance evaluations?
I do, but I can't take anybody new.
Yeah, you're
I turned away more families than I was able to take this.
Right.
You know, my clientele is usually 350 students between May and June.
Yeah.
And I was trying to cut back, and I think I'm probably going to be up to almost 400 this year.
Yeah, so
I do distance, but a lot of my colleagues, and I, as I said before, I run a Facebook page to mentor new evaluators. Okay. So if you have a friend who's a teacher and wants to do it, don't assume that person's going to know our homeschool law. The most important qualification, besides the legal requirements, is to know the homeschool law.
Absolutely.
And so anybody who's a teacher and wants to do evaluations needs to know the homeschool law.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to be a legal evaluation.
I agree, but I also think it's important for them, if their only frame of reference is a classroom setting, I think it's important for evaluators to understand that there are, once again, a lot of ways to skin a cat, so that there are limitless approaches to an appropriate education. Right.
Yes. And so on the first list that I looked at for evaluators was the CHAP website. They have CHAP online, and they have a list of evaluators, but they also listed a great list of questions for families to ask evaluators, to interview an evaluator before selecting them to do their services. And so I took those as a really good model. And then I put together a Google form, and anybody who wants to have free listings as an evaluator on my other Facebook page, Pennsylvania Homeschool Evaluators Directory, I asked them to fill out that form. And so I list them twice. Once very simple information in a Google Sheets listing by area code number, by phone number.
Okay.
And I also then do an individual posting for each evaluator that if they want to scroll down through, it's almost like a mini little interview with the evaluators. And one of them is, are you familiar with unschooling? Are you familiar with life packs? Are you familiar with a Becca? Are you familiar with Charlotte Mason?
Okay.
And how do you feel with working with the different approaches? That's one of the questions. Not every evaluator answers every question, but then I wouldn't pick them.
Yeah, what a resource. That's great. So that's on the Facebook page, which I'll link to. Is it on your website too, that directory? Okay. Okay.
Great. Because the website's strictly my business.
Gotcha.
But, yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
The Facebook stuff is...
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And I don't charge anything for that, so that's just a fun, free Facebook.
No, that's...
Hey, that was alliteration. Resource. Pennsylvania Homeschool Evaluators Directory.
Okay. Oh, I'm glad. I can't believe I didn't know about that before. I'm sorry I didn't, but no, that's a great resource too. So, well, thank you for the time. And I know that if we were in Facebook Live, there are probably tons of questions. So we can field those and I'll send them to you and yeah, that kind of thing.
Or if you say a question come up on your Facebook page, tag me in it and say, Patti, you know, and if I get it in my little notifications, I can go over and answer.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm still so clunky at Facebook, so forgive me.
Teamwork and cooperation is our family motto. That's you and I have teamwork.
Yeah, we do. No, I appreciate your time today, and it's so good to catch up with you. And I'm hoping your business, you know, is sustainable this spring. So
our God provides.
Yes,
and it's good.
Yeah,
and I do have my editing business on the side. So
wonderful.
Yeah, we're doing all right, and it's
good.
Kind of fun being retired now that we have grandchildren.
Yeah, how many do you have?
4 total. We have 3 little girls. My husband and our son married a widow with 3 little girls, and we became instant grandparents. Add water and stir. And they live in North Carolina, and we are doing FaceTime a lot. I'm helping them with their schooling.
Oh, nice.
And then, and they just had a little boy together. And so,
congratulations.
So we've got these
That's
3
wonderful.
little girls and this charming little young man, and we're soaking it all in and loving it.
Yeah, I hope you get to see them soon in person. So
We've been going down, even during COVID. We're just real careful with travel. I don't use public restrooms or anything like that. So.
Well, good. That's good to know.
Yay.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, and I'll convert this however I have to do it and put a link to it and tag you.
And everybody have a super year and have fun and enjoy your kids. Don't get stressed out by the paperwork stuff.
Yeah, maybe we got to log on another time and talk about that mindset. And that's a thing that I really try to encourage people to enjoy this time and not to get so stressed about things. So, yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.